Oh, hello everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Varun Irani. I'm a DSC core at DSC MESCOE, and together in association with PVGCOET, we are going to bring you HacktoberFest 2020. So let's see what we're going to do today. We're going to look at HacktoberFest, what is open source, and why do we contribute to it. Then your contributions begin right after that. We're going to have an expert talk by Mr. Akshay Kulkarni and an expert talk by Mr. Ashish Tetali. After that, we're going to have some fun and games and a closing ceremony. So stay tuned. Okay, so what exactly is Hacktoberfest? So it's just a celebration of open source contribution. Now, if everyone knows Linus Torvalds, founder of Linux as well as Git, so he was the one who started bringing open source into the world, and people started catching on. And nowadays, it has become such a booming thing that everyone wants to contribute on GitHub. Everyone wants to keep making repositories. Everyone wants to make new software. So the people who actually store their code on repositories, those people are called maintainers. And so those maintainers put up their projects and wait for contributors such as yourselves to contribute to their project. So let's see what happens next. Why do we have to contribute to open source? So basically, if you want to, you can definitely contribute to open source. In that way, you can improve like your skills. You can gain a lot of experience. You can give back to the community, and also it really looks good on your resume. Interviewers really love people who contribute to open source and have a really great GitHub profile. So you can start building one. Definitely, you can start building one now. So if you want to network with people, with other students that are going to do Hacktoberfest with us, please join our Discord. The link will be in the chat box as well as in the description. So the Discord, you will have a lot of channels specifically for each domain of development, web development, Flutter, Node.js, all sorts of things. And if you want to, whatever projects that you are maintaining on GitHub, you can definitely convert that into a full blown open source product. So that means people can really use it and really contribute to it. And it's a lot of fun, trust me. Okay, so what's so special about Hacktoberfest? What you can do is between the 1st October and 31st October, if you successfully get your 4 pull requests merged, you will get a free t-shirt. But here's the thing though, like it's a first come first serve basis. So 70,000, the first 70,000 people whose pull requests have been merged and reviewed by the Hacktoberfest team will get a t-shirt. But if you want certificates from the DSC, you can submit your 4 pull requests between October 11th, that is today, and October 13th, 10 a.m. Indian Standard Time. So in that way, you'll get your certificates as well as you'll have fun contributing, and you'll be on sort of a rush to contribute stuff. So that's fun. And also, just to put it out there, like just changing some text files or just changing a README or anything does not count as a contribution at all. So that's a low quality contribution. So where exactly can we contribute? So one way is going to our actual DSC organization accounts on GitHub. Here's a link, as well as the links are in the description and the chat box. You can go to these links either to MESCO or PVGCOET, or you can go to both and look at the repos there. Those repos are labeled as Hacktoberfest, and there are issues that are Hacktoberfest accepted labeled. Definitely you can go there, and there are a lot of domains out there. The domains that we are providing you here are JavaScript, Node, HTML, CSS, React, Flutter, MLAI, Python, data structures, and algorithms. So whichever you feel like contributing to, please go ahead and contribute to them. Okay, so pull requests must be definitely made from the GitHub platform only. And only when they're merged, they will count. And so I made a pull request just today, earlier this morning, and it was written at the website hacktoberfest.digitalocean.com. Over there, they told me that the pull request will be in review for 2 weeks. And so it may be merged, but they will see how legit it is. So be very careful when you're contributing. Also, uh, just to iterate once again, October 1st and October 31st. In between, you can have pull requests as much as you want. But before October 1st will not count. Only pull requests will count, and issues or commits do not count. Definitely. Okay, so sounds awesome. What are we supposed to do then? Okay, So if you haven't already, please register. I mean, now the registration links are over, but if you have registered at this bit.ly, you would definitely receive certificates from us. If you have, that's great. Then go to hacktoberfest.digitalocean.com. There will be a button there that says start hacking, and it will ask you to log in into your GitHub profile so that they can track you on how you send pull requests, have you merged anything, all sorts of kind of stuff like that. So do these. And step number 2, start hacking. So please go ahead and contribute to open source. Follow the contributing guidelines for every repository that you see. There is always a README. There's always a contributing. So it's a file that is present in the repository. Yeah. So that's all. And thank you. That's all. So that's a low cost. All right. So if anyone can see me, if you can see the screen, what you can see is a HacktoberFest repo.
एक मिनट रुक
Okay, so sorry for the delay. I was just trying to explain here that I went to DSC MESCOE, their GitHub account, and I saw a repository that I liked. So I saw HactoberFest
My voice is
data
not
structures and
streaming
algorithm.
right now, no?
I clicked fork, and it went to my account. I have a copy of it onto my account. So what I did was first take a look at the README. I understand what is there and how to contribute. I just read everything, understand what is to be done. Okay, so it tells me to contribute in a particular language for a particular data structure or algorithm. So what am I going to do is I clicked fork. Now I have it here. I'm going to click on code and I'm going to copy this URL. Once I do that, I will go to my terminal. So I hope everyone can see my terminal. I am at my terminal right now, and I have already cloned the repository by doing git clone, and I pasted that URL that I copied, and it has been cloned. So first of all, I'm going to check what's the status of this repository. So what I'm going to do is git status. What I'm going to see is, oh, okay. So right now I've added a new file in the graphs directory for C and C++ called A star, and it's the A star algorithm. So what I'm going to do is if I want the owners of the repository to see my contribution, first of all, I'm going to commit to my own repository, which I forked. To do that, step 1, obviously look at git status and you see everything is red. It was red over there that you haven't added your files to commit. So let's do git add and dot meaning the current directory. Okay, so it has been added. I'll commit and I'll write a message. Git commit is the commands that you use. Git commit -m is to specify a particular message to the contributor saying what you have done. So what I have done is added a star pathfinding, if I can spell right today, a star pathfinding algo in C++. So that's my message. Okay, so 9 files have changed. I have made some commits. That's done. So git push, and push is something like you take your code, what you've written, and put it onto the remote repository, which I'll show you later. Like the actual account where the repository where I forked in the account, you will see the new code present over there. So git push origin is the name of the remote, and main is the name of the branch. To check out what remotes you have before I do this, git remote -v tells you what remotes you have. A remote is just a location where your code is stored somewhere else. It's not stored on your machine. So we need to tell git push where the code is going to go. So you're going to use origin, and the name of the branch is main. A branch is a place where you have one specific code, and if somebody wants to create a new feature, they create a new branch, like a separate timeline, imagine, and they edit their code in that branch. Later the branches can be merged together, and so that's basically version control for you in just a gist. So I'm going to push to main. It's going to take some time. Okay, compressing. Right. Okay, so it has been pushed to main. Now what I'm going to do is show you the actual remote repository. All right, so if anyone can see the repository, I'm going to refresh. So one branch, it just is over here. So this branch that I push to is one commit ahead and one commit behind master. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a pull request. A pull request is just a way to notify the owners of the repository, please take my code and merge it into your repositories. I've added a new feature for you or a new program. So I clicked on pull request, and I'm going to click on create a pull request. Remember, I added that commit message. That exact same commit message comes here. Added a star pathfinding algo in CPP. So I'm going to create a pull request. Okay. So this branch has no conflicts with the base branch. There are no conflicts in my code. I haven't changed what was existing in the repository. I have added my own feature. And so once that is added, all I'm going to do is wait for the owners of the repository to merge my pull request. So I'm going to wait here. The owners of this repository, Dhruvil, he's going to check out this pull request, and he'll let me know whether he has merged it. Once he has merged it, I can. You will see on HacktoberFestDigitalOcean.com that your PR count has increased by 1, and your pull request PR, that is PR pull request, will be reviewed for within the period of 2 weeks. So within 2 weeks, they'll let you know whether your pull request is valid. If yes, that's cool. If no, they'll tell you the necessary changes. So that's it for today in terms of what to do with Git and what to do on the terminal, and how you create a pull request, how you commit your code, how you push your code. And all you have to do is just wait for the owners of the repository to merge your code. That's all. All right.
Hello everyone, I'm Gaurav Verma. I'm the finance core of DSC MESCOE, and now I'll tell you what all repositories we have for you to contribute for the HacktoberFest. So there are two repositories in the description section. You can see the two GitHub profiles. One is for PVG MESCOE, DSC MESCOE, and one is DSC PVG. For DSC MESCOE, you can contribute for the Java projects. In Java projects, there is game development, like any game which you have made, you can put it over here. The second is Hacktober AIML. And if you have anything related to AIML, any code related to AIML, you can contribute it over there. And the third is a calculator. So we have made a calculator using a simple HTML, CSS, and JavaScript file. And you can just create it and add more features in the calculator in it. Then the fourth is a to-do list in React. And in this, we can you have to make a to-do list, an application of to-do list using React. The fifth is data structures and algorithms. So you can have any competitive programs or anything related to data structures and algorithms, that is trees, binary trees, anything on it. And there's a recipe API of Hacktoberfest. So all the repositories which are marked with HacktoberFest, you can contribute to it. It's open to your mind. जो भी करना तुम अच्छे से करना. This is for DSC MESCO, and for DSC PV, just a minute. DSC PVGCOET के लिए एक minute. I haven't opened it yet. For DSC PVG, we have many repositories such as a React portfolio template you can make. The second is web design. In this is very interesting. So in this, you will be given an HTML file and you have to decide the CSS by yourself. Using CSS only, you have to design the page. You will be given a template HTML file. This is a game of life using JavaScript and a deep learning repository. And the fourth one is a Django repository for HacktoberFest. Fifth one is you have to develop a weather app using Flutter. And this is a machine learning repository for galaxy classification and machine learning. So in these repositories, you can contribute easily. Thank you. Yeah. And now we'll be moving on to the speakers.
Hello everyone. Hope that you all are as psyched for today's event as we are. I'm Harshada Gundecha from DSC PVGCOET and I'll be your host for this part of the event. As you know, we have two amazing guest speaker sessions lined up for you. Before we begin, let me tell you a bit about our first speaker, Mr. Akshay Kulkarni. Mr. Akshay Kulkarni has a lot of experience in building and scaling AI and ML businesses. He is a part of Sapient's core data science team. He has developed an application for a retail giant to optimize their in store process, merchandising, and supply chain using reinforcement learning, deep reinforcement, and genetic algorithms. He is a regular speaker at major AI and data science conferences, is a published author for two books on data science and ML, and is currently authoring a book with O'Reilly. He is passionate about teaching and acts as a data science mentor to various organizations. He is also a visiting faculty, that is, industry expert, to a few of the top graduation and business universities in India. In his spare time, he enjoys reading, writing, coding, and helping aspiring data scientists. Today, he will be conducting a session on driving AI and data science led strategic transformation. We are honored to have you here with us today, sir. I'm sure all our participants are eager and intrigued for your session. So, without further ado, over to you, sir. Mr. Akshay Kulkarni.
Well, thank you so much, Hassan, for this nice introduction. So I think probably we can get started, and I'm just quickly sharing my screen. So let me know once you're able to see my screen.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, great. So I feel that this is not much required for another introduction from myself. Uh, so for next 20 to 25 minutes, I'm gonna just introduce you guys to the world of machine learning, artificial intelligence, how companies have been leveraging AI and ML to kind of enhance their businesses in terms of revenue, customer experiences, and reduction in cost, all of that, right? So we'll be unlocking few of the use cases, maybe related to e-commerce, retail domains, and probably dig deeper into a few of those industrial applications, right? So this is just a quick gist of things which are happening in and around AI and ML world, and probably we can have further talks or sessions to dig deeper into each of those use cases or business problems, right? So how many of you have heard of the ones which you're seeing on your screen, right? And these are the things what we can correlate ourselves in our day-to-day lives, right? Maybe you have been using Amazon, you have been using Netflix, Google for your searches, Facebook. Everywhere you see every e-com website or applications are driven by machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? Maybe if I go like 6 years back, you need to tag your friends when you upload a picture of yourself along with your friends on a Facebook. But now Facebook helps you kind of tell you who's next to you in the picture. It actually predicts the face, the facial recognition, right? Similarly, on Netflix, based on your previous historical behavior, it kind of suggests or recommends what are the movies which might best to suits you, right? And so on. We have like sentiment analysis, spam filter, and then probably everyone uses this like word self-driving car. If I ask any aspiring artificial intelligence fellow, he'll say, no, I want to build a self-driving car. That's a fascination what everybody has, right? And that's a direction in which AI and ML is moving, right? So maybe I'll dig deeper into a couple of them, which we can of use in again day in day out, and it's been not more than like a couple of years, or maybe less than a year, wherein we see such kind of improvements which happen through artificial intelligence and machine learning. One is obviously search autocorrect and autocomplete, and its accuracy is kind of makes me sometimes says wow, right? And then grammar checkers, next word prediction, or probably completing your sentences, right? And then this is one of the fantastic application, I would say, which have been like using, or maybe which everybody is using to kind of enhance their emails, or maybe writing their email or completing their emails in a quick time around. Now, we have seen few applications, we have seen few things which have been, moving the AI and ML world in a different direction. But what exactly is AI or ML? What's the difference between them? Right? So it's not new. Artificial intelligence is not really new. It's there since like what now, almost more than 50 years. Similarly, if I talk about machine learning or deep learning, so artificial is just a bigger umbrella under which we have natural language processing, machine learning, deep learning, and all sort of things. But your question should be, if it's there since like what 50, 60 years, why it's like hot in the air now? Why people have started leveraging ML deep learning very recently? That's because of these four reasons, right? The amount of data which is captured and stored has increased tremendously. And similarly, when you look at, people started using all of these applications or ML and DL algorithms, they have realized that it's data driven decisions which are helping them increase their revenue or reduce the cost. And it was not very recently, but yes, massive increase in the computing power. The Google Cloud, Amazon, AWS, and all of this from Microsoft, everybody is pitching in and helping us with massive ramp in the computing power for running all our deep learning algorithms. Be it you're using CNNs, RNNs, all of this for face detection, emotion analysis, you need a massive computing power. And of course, as we are moving ahead, the research area is to just focus on the better accuracies for all the models, right? So with time, there's humongous increase in the data, computing power, accuracies, and obviously companies have, or organizations have started realizing that data driven decisions are more profitable, right? And yes, obviously, I'm sure you must have heard of, what Jeff Bezos says about AI, and similarly Andrew Ng. And I believe Andrew Ng is one of most popular faces, at least among the aspirants who are trying to learn and leverage his courses, his articles, his books, blogs, and whatnot. Right? And again, mobile first to AI first from Google. Right? When I talk about investments in AI, and this is a pretty old slide, but I think it has grown almost 100x of what you see in the current slide. Be it startups, the tech giants, even the consulting firms have started leveraging AI and machine learning to kind of help the business grow. Right? Now, I'll kind of stop here and maybe give you a gist of how companies or organization leverage AI. What's the trigger point? Right? Let's take an example now. Uh, there's a company XYZ, and it's been maybe it's an e-commerce company, right? And it started maybe 3-4 years ago. It's been like 6 months. The company is not doing really good. There is a decrease in the revenue when I compare it with previous years. Now, being a product manager or a CEO of a company, I'm a little worried on why it's happening. What are the reasons? How can I fix this? And when can I expect my revenue to improve? These are the questions what I have in my mind. Now, can data science, machine learning, and AI help us solve this problem? If it's So how do we unlock few of the use cases from given business problem? Right now, if I want to open this question to the larger audience here, what do you think? I mean, all you have is one business problem in front of you, which is there's a dip in my revenue and it's consistently decreasing over like past 6 months. However, when I compare this with my previous 3.5 years, it was doing really great. And probably let's keep aside the COVID impact on this. Let's assume there was no COVID, but still there is a decrease in the revenue. That's all the problem which will be thrown to you as a data scientist. Now you should start thinking in a direction. So that's why people say that data science is not always about learning new algorithms, implementing models, learning deep learning and all of it. No, it's not really always about getting more into the techniques, algorithms. Business side of it is equally important for a data scientist. Understanding the business, getting deeper into this, why this is happening, right? Now, maybe first thing which would come to our mind is, hey, maybe consumers who have been using your platform or e-commerce consistently, maybe they are starting to churn. Maybe they are moving to the competitors because of some reason. Should we do some analysis in this direction to see, hey, this is the reason why your revenue is coming down? And if it is so, we have to do a prescriptive analysis to see why it's happening. Yes, so churn prediction is one of such use cases which you can uncover. Similarly, customer segmentation. When I say customer segmentation, people, everybody who is just like doing a customer segmentation, they should really understand why you're doing it. What's the need of it? Whether your company really requires customer segmentation. If so, how are you going to plan your marketing strategies around the segments? Are you lacking in your marketing strategies? If so, can we leverage AI and machine learning to kind of do this? Right? So maybe you start seeing from an angle where you see, okay, you're lacking in few things. Maybe you're not giving a good customer experiences. Maybe your competitors are doing a lot more things which are making them retain their customers and which you are not doing. Maybe you'll have to build a recommendation engine. Maybe you'll have to build a better email classification for the complaints which has been raised on your websites. Maybe you'll have to have a personalization engine which will which makes consumers have a better experience. Maybe a visual search engine, right? So these are a few of the use cases which you'll start talking about when you know more about the business. You know that it's an e-com business and they are into XYZ products and this is their current state. On top of it, you start building few things which will help the business grow, right? So there's a lot of elements involved here. Yes, obviously one part is implementation, data science, algorithms, but the major part still includes your business knowledge, domain knowledge. How do you kind of dig deeper into the business problems, define the problems, and then translate a given problem into a machine learning or data science or AI problems or a solution approach, right? So these are a few of the industry applications, like how do you uncover from a given business problem. So far you have just seen from a retail or e-commerce standpoint, right? So on the screen now you see another such use case, maybe semantic search engine. I'm not sure how many of you have encountered this, but this is a screenshot which I took when I was just doing a shopping on Grofers. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of Grofers, but it's one of the groceries e-com giant, at least in South India, right? So I was just trying to order groceries and I started searching for the products which I'm looking for. It's still the search engine doesn't match up to the expectation of what humans have, right? So when I was just placing an order, my mom told me she needs a rice powder. So I just use the same word to kind of see if I can get that in a search. But if you see on the left side of the search, I don't see anything related to rice powder. But then, and obviously you'll have, first search, what you see is a detergent powder. But then when I search it using rice, then, usually it's a human tendency to think that, oh, rice powder is something which Grofers doesn't have in their inventory. But then when I searched it using rice flour, I realized, yes, there is something in the inventory. So this makes a big difference. You're losing a customer because your search engine is not really great or it's not up to the mark. That's why it's important you understand your business really well, you understand where you stand currently and try to improvise on top of it. On the other hand, there are other groceries giants or e-com giants which are having awesome semantic search engine. I don't want to name the websites or things like that, but yes. So this is a direction what we have to enlighten ourselves, right? Take it from the business problem. Try to define your problem first. And then yes, you can use NN, CNN, RNN, any of the algorithms, but define your problem right. Right. So there are a few other use cases, which kind of move the industries, right? Be it your entertainment industry or be it your legal searches, where lawyers, go through thousands of documents before they kind of arrive at a conclusion on a particular statements. But then AI can answer those questions in real quick time. Similarly, the chatbots, which made kind of have a better propensity for consumers to buy the products. Obviously, the recent trend has been leveraging the visual from the CCTVs across retail stores and using this heat map to analyze how the customer move around, and this will help us plan our store layout and inventories in a better way, right? And so on, right? We have like multiple use cases spread across different domains. So here are a few such applications, right? How AI is helping in marketing. Maybe predicting what's going to be our next best action or having a recommendation systems, whatnot. Maybe fraud detection, maybe anomaly detection. AI in manufacturing, right? AI in automobiles, AI in healthcare, and so on. Like we have thousands of such applications which have been proven profitable to the business. Maybe in terms of revenue, maybe in terms of customer experiences, maybe in terms of having the brand value. So every other industry have started leveraging artificial intelligence to a greater extent these days, and this is where you know it's and not only to major technology or the businesses, but even in the HR domain, AI has been used, and it's been used to, again, to the greater extent now, even in the operations and so on, right? So this is just a gist of things what I wanted to cover for today's session. It's just a short 20-minute session that I've planned for, right? Now, before I kind of leave it on to you guys for Q&A, I just want to cover this thing which I usually do in most of my talk about the statement what you see on here, right? Google betting big on Air India. Sundar Pichai. So in one of his key IO note in 2017 or 2016, I don't really remember, but he mentioned that Google is going to invest so and so billion on AI. However, the business standards or many other publications thought, oh, it's AI is Air India. Google is investing heavily on Air India. right? Do you think it's right? Not really, right? When a human can uh, kind of find it difficult to understand the context in which a person is talking about, imagine how difficult it's going to be for machines. But yes, we are there. So word embeddings and latest or recent advancements in natural language processing helps us understand the context really well, right? Obviously, now the algorithms of the machines would know, hey, you're talking about artificial intelligence and not really Air India, because it understands the context in which you're talking about. All right. So that's pretty much I had from my end for this small session. Probably after that you can open for Q&A.
Yes, sir, definitely. Everybody just write down any questions you have for sir so that we can have a Q&A session before our next session. So let's get that started. I'll wait for everybody to ask questions. Until then, I have a few questions ready with me that have been asked before. I'll just ask those to you, sir. The
Sure.
first question is, how is data science and ML used in search engine optimization?
Okay. A good question, right? So when we talk about search engine, what are the elements it involves? Or probably let's think from a layman, lenses, right? Wherein you have a placeholder where you enter the text, and that text is being searched with your corpus. Maybe you have like 1,000 products, 10,000 products, 1 lakh products. It just tries to do a similarity matching between the text what you passed on to the placeholder, what you want to search, against what you have in your corpus, maybe the inventory of products, and whichever gets you the best match, that's a top search result what you get. I'll give an example here, right? I'm searching for, maybe I'll just open up Amazon and I'll search for pink pant. Now, will you think Amazon understands whether I'm looking for a pink color pant or I'm looking for a pant which is, brand is pink? I don't know if there's a brand called Pink, but I believe there is. So how will Amazon really understand? So again, the context really matter based on your previous searches, previous results, previous behavior, previous transactions. Right now, where are we using ML or AI or whatever deep learning here, right? So major element here is how do you kind of pass on your text? So natural language processing plays a major role. And now when you're trying to compare between the two texts, what are the methods you are using? What are the techniques you are using? Maybe are you using BERT? Are you using word embeddings? Right? So deep learning, natural language processing obviously plays a major role, and probably you'll have to also extract the entities from your search. Right? Maybe named entity recognition is another application, another technique what you have to use. Then maybe another one would be word sense disambiguation. So these are a few of the techniques what you use to kind of build a search engine, AI ML based search engine.
Right, sir. So I hope sir answered that satisfactorily. Should I ask the next question, sir?
Next question. Yeah, please go ahead.
As a beginner, how should I start with ML and data science?
All right. So as a beginner, you know, I would recommend you to start with basics of statistics on one side, and on the other hand, programming. When I say programming, pick the one which is maybe easy or which you feel no okay, this is better to me. Maybe you explore both R and Python and see which makes you more comfortable, and go ahead with that first, right? One side you start with the concepts and fundamentals, and the other side you start with the programming, and you take both of these in parallel, right? Once you feel you're good with programming to some extent, and also the fundamentals of statistics. When I say fundamentals, you don't really have to get into the deep of statistics, maybe a superficial layer of that, right? And then you move on to basics of machine learning, few machine learning algorithms to start with, and then slowly getting on to a few of the complex algorithms in that, and then uh, implementation of all the machine learning models in Python or R, and then kind of taking the direction towards natural language processing, deep learning, TensorFlow, distributed computing systems, Spark, PySpark, and so on, right? So long thing short, you start with fundamentals of programming and statistics, and then you go on. So that's a journey I typically believe in.
Right, amazing, sir. The next question is, what are the research avenues present in data science or AI? How can students contribute?
Okay. So when you talk about research avenues, right, there are a lot of things which are happening, and still we haven't achieved yet. When I say this, it can be related to summarizing your text. When I say summarizing your text, maybe let's say I'll give you an article which has like what 10,000 sentences, and if I throw this as an input to one of the algorithms, is algorithm capable enough to give me a summary of that? Like how humans do, right? If you ask me to read that and tell the summary, can machines or algorithm do that? Right? So you need to hit in an area where you feel there is a lot of scope for us to kind of improvise on the existing algorithms, try to see if we can get better accuracies. Yes. So natural language processing and deep learning is something which you can start exploring. And I recommend you to start only when you are comfortable with machine learning, basics of statistics and programming.
All right.
Right? Yeah.
The next question is, how is data science used in sports? Can someone make a career there?
I wish, I hope. Anyway, when I say that, when I'm like passionate about that. Whenever I'm at least right now, given the IPL season, you see
Right.
lot of statistics and lot of analytics which plays a major role when you see any comparisons on the screen, right?
Right.
I'm not saying there's no data. There's a huge data, and I'm not sure how many of you have seen Inside Edge web series, right? And it has a major role to play when it comes to selecting your top 11 for the team. Who should be the baller given your opponents? If this person is playing, oh, we should have maybe XYZ person in our top 11. So
Right.
all of this sort of analysis, recommendations, maybe sometimes prediction as well. Yes, ML AI is playing a major role, but then it's a very niche one, and getting opportunity there is I would say really difficult, but it's not impossible.
All right. Thank you, sir. The next question is, I am in third year now. Shall I go for a career in AI or ML as a fresher?
AI or ML, again, right? Maybe we can have further sessions to talk about what's the difference between AI and ML,
Right.
because there I got confused whether she meant AI and ML or AI or ML, right? And most of the people, even aspirants or even the experienced professionals, still have a confusion whether I'm into AI or I'm into ML or I'm into data science. What are the differences, right? Maybe forget about you being a AI engineer or ML engineer or a data scientist. Start, I mean, if you like to play around with the data, if you like to tell a story from a data, if you are a curious individual who would like to do some predictions or see what's happening around data, start with understanding how you do that. Basics of statistics, basics of machine learning, visualizations, programming would kind of help you answer most of the questions.
Right. All right. Thank you, sir. The next question is, are we limited by our current hardware for running advanced algorithms?
Sorry?
Are we limited by our current hardware for running advanced algorithms?
Not really, but yes, it has yes and no to it both. Again, it comes with a cost, right? So always
Right.
you can ramp up your computing power to 10x, 20x, 100x, or so on and so forth. But is it worth it? The revenue what you are trying to make out of a given product which you are implementing, on top of cloud, is
Mhm.
it worth that cost? So obviously, the massive ramp up in the computing power comes up with the cost, right? It's a trade-off what you need to make. But yes, I would certainly say yes. Given the current state, at least from my personal experiences, I haven't felt a short of computing power for solving most of the business problems.
All right, so we are kind of a little limited.
Not really, but yes, yep.
Right. All right, sir. I see many students learning beginner level artificial intelligence or machine learning. Do we even have much scope in this field as freshers? Hello, am I audible? Hello. So, can you hear me?
They're telling you to speak on the live stream that we'll be back.
No worries, we're starting anyway, right?
Okay.
Yes, start.
You would introduce. Okay.
Alright. I'm sorry the first session had to be interrupted because of the network problems that our speaker had, but I hope all of you enjoyed that session. We are back with another awesome guest speaker, Mr. Ashish Kumar Tetali. He is a business and technology leader with over 18 years of experience. He is highly competent in building and managing high performance teams and has the ability to inspire and develop individuals to perform optimally through shared vision. His leadership style is open and approachable, and he helps lead people to meet their goals. He's committed to driving business excellence. He will be imparting his expert guidance on innovation in open source and expert source. So, sir, we're really honored to have you here with us today. And you can start, sir. Over to you.
All right. Thank you for those kind words. Can everybody see the screen and everybody's good to go? All right. So what I'm going to focus on in today's conversation is going to be based on three different elements, right? Just for making sure that everybody is on the same space, we're going to briefly talk about the history of open source, but I'm not going to spend too much time over there. But what I would like to focus on is going to be more along the the ideation and the thought process behind open source, how we got to where we are, and more importantly, where is it that we intend to be. So with that said, the first question that I have for most of you is, how old is the concept of open source, right? In the chat, if you can type your answers, that'll be great. While you're doing that, just to give you a little bit of background, right? Open source, like AI, like machine learning, as our previous speaker has mentioned, is not a new concept. Open source has been in existence for over 4 decades, right? And and it all started off with technologists really printing, writing their code in technology magazines and letting other technologists have a view into what they've written and how they could expand that. So that's how truly the first concept of open source started. And philosophically, it's a very, very important concept, right? It is a concept that knowledge should not be proprietary in nature. It should be one that should be freely shared with others, right? If you really look at the principles of it, where you have copyright, which protects ideation, which protects an implementation and all, in open source, you will hear the concept of copy left, and the left being, right, saying that this is the opposite of trying to make knowledge proprietary and make knowledge more freely available and accessible for the greater good of society, right? So that's truly what the philosophical aspect of open source is. And I'm going to delve more as our conversation progresses. And please feel free to type your questions or ask your questions. I like having sessions that are more interactive versus one way lecture sort of thing. So, just a little bit about myself, and this is more in terms of why, what is the perspective that I am bringing into this equation, right? So I've spent my last 13 years, I've started my own venture in Jan of this year, and Artis is a group company that I have that invests both in young companies and helps companies with their technology journeys, right? So it's sort of what you can look at it as really helping with strategy associated with the technology of a organization. But prior to that, I was head of strategy and transformation at MasterCard. And prior to that role, I ran one of the largest applications in MasterCard, an application of over 1 million lines of code. And a lot of the challenges that we faced while we were scaling that application, if you look at the conversations that we will engage in, they will really talk about why open source and the philosophies associated with open source are uniquely positioned, even if you're working for a multinational organization. Uh, I've also had the pleasure of starting the blockchain revolution in MasterCard and had few patents, about 14 plus, that really in that space we have explored. So for me, technology and business and the combination of those are really, I think that's where, the heart and the mind meet together. And finally, just a little bit about the college startups platform is that we're just trying to help students really provide a platform for them to explore beyond the traditional path of working in a multinational organization. We want to equip students with skills that they can start their own business, even that includes technology side of it, right? Especially the technology side of it. So with that, um, I'll move to the main part of our conversation. Um, as I said, open source, there's two elements. There's the philosophical element, and then there is the software element. And the software element, it denotes to excuse me, where the source code is made available freely, and you have the ability to build upon that. And when you build upon it, you're looking to contribute back to the source, and that way you keep building upon the work of others, and at the end what you have is something that's open, shareable, free, and really have the ability to make that for the greater good of the society at large through technology, right? So most people ask this question, why open source, right? Because what open source is truly providing is really an ability to gain competitive advantage through collaboration. Now, I know that most of us focus on technology, and that's where you hear all these open source projects that have that you're familiar with and all, and that's addressing the technology side of it. But I would want you to think beyond that. Technology is an element that is extremely important, but that's not the only element, right? So even strategy, right, has the ability to be open sourced. And I know a lot of people get scared in the business world when I say that even strategy can be open source. But truly, for me, I believe that any venture, whether it's technology, strategy, or any dimension, that can achieve an unfair advantage through public involvement, right? And that happens because you're inviting people to your platform and really asking everybody to help make that a much better platform. And truly, that is the spirit of open source. That, when Christine Peterson coined this term, they had most of the technology aspects in their mind. But I feel that the evolution and the innovation that you will be seeing in open source is going to move beyond technology, and it's going to be in the space that is pretty much going to involve all aspects such as technology, strategy, you name it. Because when you have the power of the public behind you, you already have an unfair advantage compared to an organization that is only looking at proprietary information or proprietary members that are working on a certain project and so forth. So why should you care, right? As students and as young technologists, what is it in it about open source that you should be caring about? So I look at it as three different facets. The first and most important for me is that open source gives you the opportunity to innovate, right? And innovation is a very, very key fundamental concept. And what do I mean by innovation? I mean that innovation is challenging the present conditions, right? The status quo. And then you're trying to figure out, how better can I do this? How can I take this to the next level? And if you've heard the saying that says there, two minds are better than one, that is, facilitating this innovation where you have the groupthink coming into the picture, and through that, like for example, it's a game that I used to play when I was a kid with, where you have like a story where one part of the story is told by one person, then they stop, the next person picks up the story and continues it. And what you see at the end of it is going to be really innovative because it took multiple minds to come with that. So again, open source also gives you this ability, right, to be creative and experimenting. And experimenting is extremely important because the way you see experiments is that you're trying and testing and seeing what works, what doesn't, and when it doesn't, you then move forward with another hypothesis, and then you're able to take it forward. And finally, really what open source gives you, and when you're contributing your contributions, is the ability to earn respect from your peers. And in the open source world, that respect is your reputation, and having a great reputation by giving back to society is a foundational piece of that. So with that said, I think that as young technologists, it's really important for you to understand both the philosophical piece of it, but it is also important for you to really look at this from a business and technology perspective. And what we're going to focus next on is going to be on the business aspect of it. So as I said, open source as a business has had multiple iterations, right? In generation one, right, it was really about offering the main product for free and then charging users for enterprise licenses, right? And really looking at it like in terms of if they wanted additional services and training, that was what was offered free. But the main product itself was given to both organizations and private individuals, whoever wanted to use it for free. A great example of this licensing model was Red Hat and MySQL, right? So that's where it truly started as a business, obviously, because the software itself was supposed to be given as free, but you have the services and training being charged for. Now, the second facet of um, open source as a business was introduced with having an open core model, right? Which provided a way for open source companies to productize the open source by surrounding it with source technologies with proprietary enterprise features. So what I mean by that is that you had a free version, and then you then build other components around that free version of software that was openly being shared, and then you monetized on the piece that was proprietary to you, but the main core was given still out as free, right? So you had these ability for organizations, right, to enjoy enterprise ready versions, because it was not just the software that was being contributed by the public, but really a software that was contributed by the public, plus you had enterprise ready features, and then together the package really made it a lot more attractive. Companies that are very popular in popularize a lot of this concepts was like Cloudera, right? And they really had this on-premise model, as well as having enterprise scale deployments, and really bringing the best of open source as well as the proprietary world together in a facet that made it really interesting for organizations to dwell in, right? And truly, that's where you saw open source really moving from the fringe to coming into corporate world. And it's very important for us to understand this transitions, because that history may not repeat itself, but it surely rhymes. So there's going to be elements of the core that you see going forward, and you see what is truly the core spirit of open source and how is that being moved forward. And today the third version comes from cloud monetization, right, which is the cloud model. uh, because if you look at it, almost everything is moving from an on-prem model, on premises, right, where you had your own data centers or your infrastructure. It's moving to that. There was also one aspect what had happened in generation 3 was that the cloud companies, right, there were a lot of pain points because these open core product models, when they were, when companies were looking at moving it into the managed cloud version, there were challenges, right? And Model 3 handles, the generation Model 3 handles this really well, because what it does is that it provides solutions for companies that are looking to move into the cloud model but still leverage the open source vendors. And what had happened was that Amazon and Google and all these cloud providers were taking unfair advantage of the open source model, where they were taking the model themselves, but they were not contributing back to the movement. And now you see companies like MongoDB that are really restricting how cloud vendors use their product. And it's a hit for them in terms of short-term profitability, but they really are, true to the movement, and they want to make sure that as they're scaling up, as they're, getting these movements move forward, they really want to take advantage of both the philosophical part of it as well as the business part associated with it. So these are basically where they are currently. But I think that that part is one side of it. But what I think we should be focused on is more or less, how this has creeped into the organizations, and really how, the second part of my conversation is going to be on how multinational organizations are leveraging open source and how they're building it. And then the final part of my conversation is going to be really talking about the future. So with that, I'll take a pause and open it up for any questions onto the philosophy and how open source as a business model has been till now. Do we have any questions that?
Sir, I'm just checking. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Guys, if you have any questions, just type it in the chat box immediately so that we can ask sir. We have one question.
If you need time, yeah, go ahead.
How does open source blockchain work? That's one question.
Perfect. It's a great question, because this one I was actually waiting for somebody in the audience to ask, because one of the greatest successes of open source is the blockchain technology, right? So how it works is two things. So first, I want to make sure people understand the difference. There is Bitcoin and these crypto coins that you hear of that are being used as a monetary exchange tools. And then there's the technology of blockchain, right? So I want to make sure that everybody is clear on the differentiation. Now, blockchain, the way it goes is, one, the source code for blockchain is freely available. Every client, right? Every client node is the same as, there is no one mother node, right? It's the perfect part about an open ledger is that every transaction, the source code behind it, everything is freely accessible by any node in the network. And that's a very, very powerful concept, because what it's really done is that you have governance in, without having a central authority, right? Usually, if you look at our society, we have like the government, and then you have the representatives, you have the people. The government has a higher standing than an individual. It's only when you have, a collective of people that are, as a collective, they work together, will they ever be more powerful than the government? But in this whole blockchain world, that is not the way it's been designed. It's been designed with openness and the ledger. So you see, that's where you see a Bitcoin being forked into, a Litecoin or into some other model. You see a lot of these open source philosophies attributed into the blockchain world. So that is definitely one of the key aspects of open source movement. And I think it's going to be one that's going to be very powerful as we go forward.
Thank you. We have another question. Can I call my program open source even if I don't use an approved license?
See, the fundamental of open source is that you have a community backing it up, right? So you've written a program and then you decided that, listen, I want this program to be available to everyone, right? And then you publish the source code, right? Whether it's in GitHub or wherever. But can you call yourself open source? Yes, you are open, but for you to really make the impact, you need a community backing you up. If you're able to get, for example, a group of colleagues or friends to start contributing to that, because it's all about open source is about making it bigger than you, right? Making it survive even if you're not there. And it's only when you're able to get the community involvement in it are you truly able to get the philosophy of open source going. If you're the only one who's doing it, yes, it is open source for sure, but it's not at the scale that it will be sustainable.
Right. Thank you, sir. I don't think we have any more questions right now, so maybe we can continue and then we'll ask questions at the end then.
Sure. Yeah. So I've got two more pieces where I was trying to inject questions in, but we will move to the inner source. So inner source is basically how does open source movement creeped into or infiltrated into organizations, right? So there's two elements of it. One is the part where you use, for example, for your database needs, you're using a NoSQL or you're using a MongoDB or Cloudera, whatever it is. So that's fairly simple. An organization, is using one of the products built out of the open source movement. And that I think each of us understand that, and it's fairly self-explanatory. There's not much to it. But there is another element that is very, very important. It is taking the best of open source, the way open source movement has come together, and really taking those principles and applying it into core development of an organization. So, for people who are familiar with this, is a comic that was published. This is pre Satya Nadella of how Microsoft operates, right? And truly, this is not just Microsoft; it's a lot of multinational organizations. They have this philosophy, right? So each of these organizations have multiple departments, and each department has multiple business strategy people, technology people, and there's a huge support structure for each unit. But what you seldom see is that these divisions don't interact with each other in a manner that overall enhances the organization, right? Each department, in fact, makes it, they feel that what they're working on, their product, their application, their source code, they treat them as top secret within the organization itself, which is really, when you think about it, really funny to think about. It's just one organization, yet people behave as if they're in competition, not with the outside world, but inside. So it's more like the turf war. And this was the culture that you find when you join in most multinational organizations. So once you graduate, you join in, you'll actually be working with maybe a team of 10, 15, 30 people, and whatever you're working on to a large extent is only visible to those 30 people, but the organization you're working in could have 2,000 people or 10,000 people, whatever that number is. So that obviously has a lot of challenges. And if you look at the open source model, one of the greatest things that open source model has brought is this ability for any person, whether they're in India, whether they're in US, whether they're in Ukraine, it doesn't matter where you are, you're able to work in a collaborative manner. And you're able to create this community where there is no financial reward in the picture for anyone, right? So these, when you're contributing to these open source projects, you're not getting paid. While in organizations, you're getting paid and yet you don't share your information with your colleagues in the organization. So really, this philosophy uh, was really adopted by a lot of companies to change their internal culture. So that's why it's called inner source, right? It's taking that open source philosophy and bringing it. And it helps in three different ways. The first and foremost is this open community concept, right? It is the ability to break silos and establish a process where people are able to collaborate with each other. And this open source community, I'll tell you that, I mean, why open source is such a powerful movement and why we are even talking about it today is because of the support from the community. If tomorrow community disappears, all these products will just disappear because they no longer will hold the same sort of relevance. So it's actually people that make this really, really strong and successful, right? And taking those practices, such as, when you're collaborating across the globe, across different people, across different skill sets, because some people who are contributing are students, others who are contributing are people with 20 years of experience. How the open source community manages all of that. There's a lot of great lessons that now multinational organizations have adopted, especially in terms of documentation, improved code quality, testing coverage, and really the culture, right? And introducing this culture of collaboration, right? So that's one facet that's really benefited the multinational organizations that they've copied from open source community. Transparency, right, is the other element. As I was saying, today each department does not share their own code or their lessons learned with other divisions. With the open source community model, everything is done in a very transparent model, and you have the insights into what is department, let's say, for example, in faster payments doing versus what is the department of security doing. So really bringing all these communities, the departments together and building uh, this trust and reputation amongst each other. And finally, scalability. I think open source has done a phenomenal job, the movement in terms of scalability. As I said, it's this ability to collaborate with no one centralized location or, aspect controlling it, but really opening it up to all the developers across the whole world at their own free time and really contributing whatever little they can, five lines of code to, 1,000 lines of code. It really doesn't matter, and really making this success. So a lot of organizations are looking at that model and they're seeing that how can we incorporate that. So I'll give you, an example in my past life, right, on how the challenges that we've seen and how this open source methodology helps us solving the problems inside. So what happens is when, for example, my time during MasterCard, the way we operate is that I had the team that I was managing in its greatest, as you say, called the glory days. We were a team of 60 people, right? That were managing, a product of million line code base. That was at the glory days. And we eventually, when I was running towards the end of it, we were about 15 people, right? So what has used to happen is that when we have a big project that comes in, right, and we say, okay, you need to build an ability to communicate with customers, for example, we start fresh a lot of times. We then go out to the market, we recruit new developers. It takes about 2 to 3 months to bring them on board, get them used to our environment, our application, and then only after 3 months would that developer be helpful. They used to be in different parts of the organization, talent that's readily available that may not be working as critical project as the one that you have at hand, but because there is no transparent mechanism within the organization, you don't really have a clue as to this talent and the capabilities they bring to the equation. And a lot of times there are multiple products that do similar things within the same organization. So in organizations, because of this siloness, each time we try to solve and build our own wheel rather than leveraging the wheels that have been built together. Now imagine if you had an open catalog, you had talent that's tied to that open catalog. So when I want to build something new, rather than trying to start afresh, I go take a look at it and see, are there similar components that can do, maybe 70% of what I'm envisioning, and I only build the next the rest of the 30%. Or maybe I do have to start fresh, but there are people who've worked on similar challenges, so therefore I can borrow those resources versus trying to go to the market and trying to spend a 3-month onboarding process. So these concepts are extremely important for organizations in increasing their efficiency and effectiveness. Now, most of you might be wondering, listen, you're talking about an organization point of view, great, but how does that help me? And so, where it helps you as an individual is that when you go into an organization, make sure that as many people in the organization as possible know what you bring to the table. You also express your interest levels and things like that. So you bring how this open source community, the transparency and things like that, the philosophies that work, you bring those to the table and say, listen, I'm willing to work beyond not only what my current charter is, I'm willing to dedicate some of my free time to learn things that I may not be responsible or it's not my purview. When you do that, you're really able to build a successful career because people see that you're willing to contribute to the greater good of the organization, and those are the type of people that they want to be part of their team. So you will end up seeing a lot more offers for you to join their team versus an individual who's just sticking to doing what they've been asked to and not moving beyond that. So this concept is extremely important not only for the organizations, but it's also for the technologists that are part of these organizations to bring the philosophy, and that philosophy will help both the business side as well as the technology side. So with that, I'll take a pause as to how internal open source philosophies are impacting organizations. And then the final section is going to be how I see the future and the revolution continuing forward. Do
So,
we
sir,
have
we
any
can have a
questions?
question and answer session.
Sorry, what was it, Harshada?
Sorry, we do have a few questions. So,
Yeah.
the first one is, what if I work on someone else's operating OSS and they modify the license later on, which restricts some permissions that I had earlier access to? Can I still continue to use the OSS the same way as I started?
Technically, no, right? So that's actually the challenge with what is happening with the commercialization of these open source systems, where they start off with a very relaxed license, and then when they change their license mode, you are bound, after the notice period by the new rules. And if you're not following by the new rules, generally you don't get sued, but technically you're still not following it. It depends on the enforcement, right? Should OSS community choose to enforce the licensing, the new licensing terms, then you will be bound by it. So unfortunately, that's one of the key, it's almost like, if I can use the Hindi word, it's like dagabaz, right? It's where you benefit from the community and yet you are modifying it where the community can no longer reap the same rewards.
Right. The next question is, if a startup has certain groundbreaking modules which cannot be open source before developing the MVP, is it possible to open source only part of that project?
You can, again, it depends on what are you covering, depending on whether you're using an Apache 2.0 license or, an MIT or, GPL. It depends on your licensing model, but yes, there is, you do segregate, right? There are certain elements where you don't want to share with the public because that's proprietary, that's your secret sauce, or that's what you view as your competitive advantage. But what happens though is that it becomes a partial solution, right? So if your open source system is only doing partial, it's very hard to attract community to sponsor that, right? Because you really need outside developers to come and help you grow that And if they feel that you're keeping the good parts to yourself and monetizing and profiting out of that and not giving back to the society, then they may not be as dedicated to your cause as maybe some other project where the whole company is the whole source code has been available, and more people are more and more finding that as a lucrative cause to be part of. So that's something to keep in mind.
All right, thank you, sir. The next question is, how can open source be used to fix outdated code or documentation? I have been restricted a lot because of compatibility issues while using an older library or framework.
I'll tell you that in especially multinational organizations, right? Compatibility is a major, major challenge, right? Even I'll give you my own application example. For us, when we started, 13 years ago, we were at the cutting edge of technology, right? Using all the latest, Java libraries. And as we built a code base of close to a million lines, for us, upgrading, from one version of Java to another is like a momentous task. I mean, just security itself, it took us close to 2 years to upgrade our security model, right? So what happens is that all this, challenges occur because in the past, modular components were not, people used to build them as monolith, right? So that's why now you hear software in the software space, people talking about microservices, people, talking about open APIs and all, but really get rid of the terms. What they're really saying is that let's build software in more component basis so that when we have to take one component out and introduce a newer component of that, it becomes easier versus putting it as building the house as one unit. If you have to change the roof, you literally have to break every wall before you change the roof. So as I said, it's extremely important that you design right, you architect it right, and then you can take advantage of whether it's open source model of getting others to help you upgrade, or whether it's inner source where you have teams that are doing it themselves but are following the principles of open source. All that will only become easier if you've architected it right in the first place, which is making things more modular in nature.
Right. Okay. If open source is so good, then why are closed source programs like Adobe and companies that use it on top of the chain?
Sorry, Harshada, you were breaking up. Could you repeat that question again?
I'm sorry. If open source is so good, then why closed source programs like Adobe and companies that use it on top of the chain?
Yeah, so open source is so good because of two things, right? You are looking at it, open source is a mindset, first and foremost, right? Before you even get into business and technology. And open source mindset, the philosophy of it is that I don't want to hoard knowledge. I want to share my knowledge with everyone. So for example, machine learning algorithm, for example, or you're good at it. If only you know it and suddenly something happens to you, that knowledge gets lost, right? But when you make it public and others know, that knowledge survives way beyond you. That's why we have our Shastras, we have the Bible, we have all this, is where people have written that knowledge down or transmitted it from one person to another. And even, millennia later, they've survived, right? When it's closed group, regardless of however good it is, if it's only with that closed group, and if that group, something happens to the group, the knowledge dies with them. Now, why are closed proprietary systems still more popular? The reason is because one of the key considerations is security, right? Security is one aspect that most companies feared when they were using open source software in the earlier days. So, but that, most organizations have now overcome. Now, when you look at an Adobe and all, you can have something that's proprietary, you can have things that are protected by patents, but that will only sustain you for a little while. And these companies, they're again taking advantage of open source in the form of inner source within their organization. So even though they're not from an outside in perspective look like they're open source, they're leveraging a lot of the fundamentals of open source within the organization. They're just not inviting outside developers to contribute. But if you create a competitive product, right, with a strong community, I will guarantee you that product will have a far greater outlasting success than these proprietary companies.
Okay, sir. The last question I think that we have is, how will Google Summer of Code help someone boost their career?
Sorry, what was that question? Uh, could you
How
repeat it,
will,
please?
how will Google Summer of Code help someone to boost their career?
See, whether it's Google Summer of Code or similar opportunities, as I was saying, it goes into your ability to, innovate, be creative, experiment, and really gain reputation of your peers, right? So these are the three fundamental principles when you're doing it. So when you're young, your greatest benefit is your ability to experiment, because the cost of failure when in your younger days is a lot less than failing when you're much more into the future, right? So I'll give you one example. Like, a cost of mistake in the design phase and the cost of mistake once your code hits production, uh, there is a huge element of difference. Most companies, for example, in MasterCard and other places, if our code does not perform the way it's supposed to, there's financial ramifications, right? A bug from a developer could cost us even hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties to our clients if it's not working. When you're in the open source world, when you're in the Google Summer of Code and all, there is no financial ramifications to some of your mistakes, but the ability to be experimenting and innovating will help you build the principles which later, when you join these large organizations, you will be able to take those philosophies, principles, and techniques and then get greater output for you in your career, and really have a growth model that's far more stronger than somebody who's not participated in these kind of events.
Great, sir. So I think that's it for now. We can continue with the session.
All right. So the final part, and I think which is truly the crux of what I want to try and talk about, is how do I see the future evolving, right? And the next revolution, according to me, is going to be expert source. So what do I mean by expert source, right? So I mean open source plus inner source, right, is what uh, I consider my definition of expert source, right? It's this ability to bring the best of both worlds together and leverage that, so that way you have built the philosophical need to giving back to society and all. Then you have the principles of inner organization, really taking that same mindset and having closed loop part of it. So you have these two worlds that are simultaneously going right now, but when you bring them together, you're able to disrupt industries. So let's talk about, I'll give you one example. So you guys have heard about Accenture, you've heard about McKinsey, you've heard about all these consulting companies, right? And if you look at it, how do those companies operate, right? They basically recruit a lot of times, MBA students from top institutions, technology students from top institutions, and then they place those clients, for example, in multinational organizations such as Microsoft, MasterCard, whatever companies, you name it. And then they generate a fee model. Now, when you are in an expert sourced model, right, how, for example, I want to get into that space and I want to challenge them. Now, I don't have the same money to offer as a new venture or a business startup the way they would. So let's assume that I'm able to leverage people. Let's take a topic on, infrastructure automation, right? There are already a lot of people who are working in different companies that have this knowledge about infrastructure automation. So if I create a gig economy, right, where those individuals are able to contribute to the projects that I am doing for my clients, and in turn have a monetary element giving back to those different people, I am now able to bring a new business model in its entirety to the equation. Because today in open source, you get reputation and all, but you're not getting any financial benefits, right? And as one of the questions earlier alluded to, a lot of times you contribute a lot to the society and the open source platform, but they change a license and it becomes a lot more restrictive. So if you're able to monetarily also incentivize the community that's contributing to making your services better, your product better, whatever it is, and then you're able to take that and go to these multinational organizations and say, listen, I'm able to bring the power of the developer community plus my own experts who I might have as more of the community administrators and guardrails, and then I'm able to now offer these services to you at a much cheaper price than what your traditional technology consulting company or business consulting company, whatever is the field you're talking about, is able to give you. Now you have a much stronger value proposition than the traditional business model that is today. And you can have that element, right? Even in, let's say, for example, you want to start a new project, right, around augmented reality or whatever it is. And let's assume that you have a gamification model where, depending on how much a user contributes, you reward them with points, and those points can eventually be redeemed for monetary value. Once you start commercializing your product, you're able to build a much stronger community than if you're just relying on the free will and the goodwill of a development community where they're just contributing to make it better, but they have no gain in the end. So when I talk about expert source, I really am bringing that concept of open source philosophy with the inner source capabilities and merging both together to really disrupt and really almost any industry we can look at how it could work. And I think that that truly is where I see the future being. And in fact, that's something I'm right now pursuing to try and see, does my hypothesis stand ground or not, right? Because I feel that truly that is the future of the best of both worlds of open source and inner source. So uh, to recap, right? And again, I want to make sure that I have more time for questions, because truly that's where you learn a lot more. Is open source has started this whole revolution that led to inner source, right? Where organizations have taken a lot of that philosophy and fundamentals into the equation. And for me, as I said, I truly believe the future is going to be on expert source, where you will have experts all over the world coming together, being rewarded for their contributions. And there is obviously this intent that is not only to, give back in terms of just goodwill of having the code freely shareable, but there's a commercialization element, and that benefits are reaped to the members in the community. And that is what the future is going to be in this space. That's where you see the innovations happening. And as technologists, it's important for you to know this, because then you can position yourself to be able to take advantage of the right. So with that, again, I want to open it up for questions and conversations so that we can, again, explore what I've said more with concrete examples.
Definitely, sir. We have our questions already. Two people have asked. So the first is, how susceptible is open source software to closed source companies stealing the code? How often does this happen?
See, closed source, like for companies, right? Maturity is a very, very important concept, right? So multinational organizations, when they are taking an open source project, they will only do that if there is maturity in the product line, right? In the sense that that product has been around for quite a while, and then there is a strong community supporting it. I'll give you one example. So when a couple of years, I would say maybe 5 or 6 years, or maybe even longer. I apologize, in terms of getting that time scale wrong. But we used, when we were looking at Web 2.0 technologies for our front end, we use GWT, Google Web Toolkit. If for people who are familiar with it, that was Google's UI UX framework, right? And we had leveraged that, and we built quite a few of our front end based on that technology. And 2 3 years after using that framework, unfortunately, Google decided to discontinue supporting the community, right? And once that happened, all that investment we had made using that framework to build a lot of our front end just became much lesser in value, and we really had to put a strategy in as to what would be the next technology that we will use. And we finally decided to go with Angular JS. But really, that maturity and community support are extremely important. And one of these, like for example, if Google is not supporting GWT, then none of the other partners in the ecosystem were strong enough to continue. They tried for a year or two, and then they realized that they were not able to attract enough of the community to contribute to the source code, and those movements just died. So it's really important to showcase maturity and engagement of the community before an organization will bring that model into their company and build upon it.
All right. Okay, sir. Another question is how to build an open source startup.
See, as I said, earlier as well, the key is going to be the area that you want to build in. Is there already other open source initiatives, and you're better off contributing to that and leveraging that? Or if you want to start fresh, you have to really figure out how are you going to attract the community, and how are you going to ensure that the community is going to be engaged, right? And then obviously you have the other aspects, such as making sure that the quality, what is the code acceptance criteria, all those, you'll have to figure that out. But really, community engagement is going to be the biggest challenge. And if you don't have a strategy to engage the community, I think that you're better off leveraging, another open source project, or movement, versus trying to build your own.
Um, that's great. Thank you, sir. We have another question, I think. Isn't it risky if I'm starting a startup and my program is open source? Can any competitor copy my code and make a clone of it?
Absolutely, right. That is a valid concern, and a lot of people have that fear, and that is why you don't see startups really engaging in that model, right? You have to really think about, you see, I do another course that I help students with on startups, right? At the fundamental nature, what is a startup, right? It's a company that's designed to grow very fast, right? So you really have to look at, for startups, growth and traction is what they're really looking at. Now, when you have 2 developers, 3 developers, because you don't have enough money in, are you able to build your code base fast enough? Maybe not. So you need the power of the community. A lot of times, what I would suggest is, if there's something proprietary that you feel is your value add, and if it's worthwhile for you to keep it secret, because that's where your secret sauce is, and you don't need a lot of people to contribute to that, then maybe a closed proprietary model is for you. But what you're building is table stakes. It's not really very new in innovation, but your execution strategy is that you will reach more people than your close competitors. Then an open source model will help you achieve that, because you're really bringing community into everything that you're doing, and then you're using the power of the community to expand at a much accelerated pace than your competitors. So it's really important for you to figure out what is it that you're trying to solve, and how fast can you grow, and which model helps you grow further. And I know that it's a little bit of a nuances answer, that it depends on the situation, but truly that's what it is.
All right, one last question I think. How can original authors of some code track their code and make sure it isn't being misused by other people?
Great question. So the reason I was laughing is because freedom is a very important concept, but freedom can be, used as well as abused. So what I mean by that is, let's say a parent gives freedom to their kid to say that, you don't need to be home, you can be home by 10 o'clock, right? 10 p.m. in the night or something. You're giving the freedom, the kid is happy about it, but what the kid does once you've given them the freedom, you don't have much control about that. So that's how open source works as well. So once you contribute your code into that repository, how your code is being leveraged and how it's being used, you have very limited control. You've let the bird out of the cage, and what happens to the bird is very difficult for you to control. You can influence it depending on your standing, but even regardless of if you're the number one contributor also, your only threat is that I will no longer contribute to that repository or to that community. But other than that, you really have very limited ability to influence. So you hope that the best of every person will take that spirit and do good with it. But there have been plenty of occasions where people have done bad things with other people's code. And yeah, go ahead.
I hope like that answered it. One more question was, I know we've been told many times about how to contribute to open source, but I want to know more about it. So how can I find topics and ways to do so?
Sorry, Harshada, can you repeat the question? There was a middle that you just cut off.
I'm so sorry. I think I'm having some network issue. Uh,
Oh, no, no worries. Just, yeah, go ahead.
Sir, how can I find topics and ways to contribute to open source? It has been answered before, but I want to know more about it.
Yeah, so my suggestion would be that first and foremost, when you're contributing to open source, what is it that you're trying to get out of, right? Because you're doing free service, right? Free time for a cause that, you may not be able to monetize, or you may not even be able to get the rewards that you're looking for. So if it is just you want to contribute to one of the movements, that because the number one reason is passion, right? If you're passionate about a certain topic and you want to get involved and you want to go deeper and deeper, and you really are looking at that learning experience, it becomes extremely easy for you to do that and sustain that for a longer period of time. But if your reasons are other than that, right, then you might be better served to spend your time in different things. You could explore, product development. You can get few friends around, do the same elements of an open source, but make it in a manner where you can benefit monetarily, or eventually, builds a movement out of them. So I would again suggest that what is it that you're really passionate about? What is it that you're trying to get out of? Have those things written down. And if you feel that you have a strong, liking to one versus another, build upon that. Because what happens is that, when your students, when you originally do it, 3 times, let's say you submit your code to one of the open source projects, right? And they reject it. Do you have the same level of motivation to do it the fourth time? For a lot of people, the answer is no, right? So these things are not easy. And if you're not passionate about them, the chances are that it will be very difficult for you to sustain them.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. I think that's it for the question and answer session. And honestly, while the session was going on, a lot of people told us that the session was amazing and they were learning a lot through it. I mean, we were getting constant messages on WhatsApp and stuff too. So, thank you so much for the wonderful session. It was really great. And thank you for taking time out for us.
The pleasure is mine, and for you and your audience, I'm always available if anybody wants to, reach out to me. in private as well, and they have more questions, I will again just put my email address, so you can either contact me on LinkedIn, or you can contact me at ash@collegestartups.in. Um, what I would encourage, my final thoughts for all of you is that you're really highly motivated, future leaders, right? Both in the technology space as well as in other spaces, right? So always look at this as, what is the big picture? What am I really passionate about? And when you know yourself a little bit better, that's when you should jump into things, right? And don't be afraid to experiment. One of the key things that I see a lot of youngsters is that they want to pick their final path on day one itself. Don't do that, because you don't know what you like and what you don't like yet. You think you know, but you don't. So experiment, explore, and then from there develop your passions, and then you'll always find mentors like me that are willing to help you in your journey. And don't be afraid to reach out to us, and wherever and however we can help. Especially, I'll open that up for any of your audience. I'm more than happy to sit with anybody and help mentor them in whichever areas that they're looking at. With that, again, thank you for this opportunity to
Thank you,
address
sir.
all
I'm
of you.
sure many people would love to reach out to you. And thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Thanks everyone, and have a nice day.
Have a nice day, sir.
on Git and GitHub. So everyone, please join Kahoot.it and they'll ask you a game pin. So our game pin is 7679892. Join ASAP. Yeah. We have LV Beat here, we have Vivek here, we have Mooney here, we have Snoopy Cat here. Everyone, please join as soon as possible. We'll be starting shortly. Everyone, please join as soon as possible. We have Kumar here, we have SB King here. It's awesome. We have Harshal here. Harshal. Dolphin is here. SVS is here. Rohit is here. So is Leo. Mayur 7. No. Winner. Snazzy. Join fast. We'll be starting at 5:45 sharp. Sharply at 5:45 we'll be starting. Frame is here. Chaotic Black is here. Opera is here. Snappy is here. We'll wait for 4 minutes and then we'll start with the quiz. Mhm. So please keep your streams on. We'll show the question will be on the stream and make sure the stream is live so that you don't have any trouble. And yeah, you'll get options on your phone or other devices. 4 options. One of them is correct. And yeah, all the best for the quiz. We'll be starting shortly. Oh, nice. We have 32 participants. Watching is around 50, so I want all the 50 participants to come as soon as possible. Just make sure everyone clicks the like button down there. There shouldn't be any delay or you won't get enough time. Hi is here. Yolo is here. Anushka is here. That's great. We'll be starting in the next 2 minutes, so please join as soon as possible. You'll be given a question and 4 options, and you have to choose the right option on your phone or other devices where you have logged in. So yeah, we have 33 participants right now. Okay, we will be starting in a minute, and if everyone is you are ready, just write start in the chat so I can start then. Okay, Masira is here, Coder is here. So I guess we can start. Just write in the chat to start and you'll start. Let's start. Okay. Samiran says start. Sunanda says start. So yeah, we will start right now. Let's start. So the correct answer is Vim for this question. We'll be starting with the next question right now. So the answer is username and password. You need to configure your username and password. So right now, if you see the leaderboard, we have Rohit with leading, second to Prem, and then Hi, Harshal, and Mooni. Next question. So 19 of you were correct. The answer is Git initialize, Git init. And now if we see the leaderboard, Rohit is still leading next to Prem and then Harshal. Next question. Most of you said it correct. It was dot git ignore. 17 of you were right. Next question. Let's see the lead. Rohit is still leading next to Prem and then Harshal, Mooni, and then Ajinkya. Okay, next question. Nice. 23 of you were right. The answer is git clone. Let's see the leaderboard. And Rohit is still leading next to Prem, Harshal, Mooni, and Ajinkya. Next question. Nice. Git status is the right answer. And now we will see the leaderboard. 5 players have reached the answer streak of 4. That's pretty amazing. Rohit is still leading next to Prem and Harshal. Next one. That's great. Git init is the right answer, and 15 of you correct. Oh, there's a change in the leaderboard. Now Moni, Winner, and Ajinkya are top three. So next question. Oh, only 6 of you got it right. Git is a decentralized version control tool. And now we have Snazzy up. Next question. C was the right answer. 9 people have chosen the right answer. We'll see the leaderboard, and oh, Snazzy is up and Rohit is still leading. Next question. Double. Git push was the right answer. 25 of you got it right. And let's see the final leaderboard. Coming in third is Mooney. 8 out of 10 questions right. Coming in second is Winner. Oh, that's a nice name. And first is Rohit with 8 out of 10 questions correct. Fourth is Ajinkya and Snazzy. So thank you guys for joining in this Kahoot. Next we'll have a closing remark. Thank you.
Live, right? Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Ritujaya. We hope you all have learned a lot from our cognizant speakers, Mr. Akshay Kulkarni and Mr. Ashish Tetali. And I'm sure the Kahoot quiz thing was fun for you. Now that we're here, it's appreciative of you, audience, to have given us your persistent attention. Just stick up with us for a few moments and bear with us because there are some points which need to be put forth at the end. First of all, a pay of gratitude to our sponsor, ProGate, for this huge, humongous event of HacktoberFest Pune, and to our leads, Sunanda Somvase from DSC PVGCOET and Karan Bagh from DSC MESCO. We're also thankful for the collaborating DSC team members for having been able to successfully deliver this event, and to all those who made it possible to include this event. Also, a note of thanks to Harshal from DSC MESCO, who's worked it out behind the scenes to render this event virtually as you can see it. It was a success, definitely. And finally, a few more important points before the closure. The participants can keep making pull requests until the 10th AM of 13th October, that is the day after tomorrow. Also, do not forget to fill the certificate form in order to get certificate after completing the 4 PRs. Thanks again for your presence. That'll be all for now. Happy hacking!